Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel on TechStrong TV, and welcome to Tuesday, June 23rd. Hey, if you're counting, this is episode 56 of TechStrong TV, which is it's quite a lot when you think about it. It just keeps rolling along. But, in going over the production notes for today's shows and these segments that we're going to be showing, I realized just how kind of popular this has become based upon the interviews that we've already conducted that we'll be showing over the next couple of days, as well as the outreach from the tech community requesting interviews. And most importantly, when we look at the stats of viewers, it used to be we'd show the show at 9:30 in the morning and we'd get a few stragglers watching. These days, it seems like people are waiting for the show to start at 9:30, and thank you very much. We appreciate your patronage. We hope you're getting some value out of it, and hope to have more great content for you in the days and weeks ahead. But let's talk about today. We've got some good stuff today. My first interview this morning is with Daniel Dulac and Rob Huff. Daniel's with Extreme Networks, and Rob is with an MSP based in Covington, Kentucky, which is right out of Cincinnati, outside of Cincinnati, actually, called Step CG. And it's about a new innovation center that they've opened in Covington. Funny time to open an innovation center, but of course these things can't be planned and timed like that. So we're going to talk to Daniel and Rob all about that. Then I'm going to introduce you to another company. And this company, every entrepreneur wants to change the world. This company really wants to change the world and has a business plan to it. They've been around for about 4 or 5 years, but they're just kind of catching on here in the States as well. They're called Hadean. And I spoke to Craig Bettis from Hadean, and I'll tell you more about it right when I introduce his segment. And then we're going to go into the Something Old section of our show. And again, going back to TechStrong Con, showing you some of the great presentations we had there. Today is from one of my favorite ladies. She's actually kind of one of the founders of the DevSecOps movement. She actually did found DevSecOps.org. She leads development red team over at Intuit. And she's just a really nice person, as well as very, very intelligent, and always makes a nice presentation. My friend Shannon Leeds from Intuit did a great job at TechStrong Con on aligning security for an automated business. And we're going to replay that here today. Of course, as a reminder, all of the TechStrong Con segments are available on Digital Anarchist, as well as on TechStrongCon.com. You can go in and actually go into the whole virtual event environment to watch all of the segments, as well as visit the exhibits. Anyway, after Shannon, I'll be back with the headlines for today across the media ops sites. And then we're going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon over in Virginia. Charlene has a good interview today with Will LaSalle, Senior Director, Global Security Solutions at OneSpan. And after that, Charlene is going to do a webinar preview. It's a new week coming up, and she'll be previewing some of the great webinars we have on Media Ops this week that you don't want to miss. After that, we'll head things over to Mitchell for the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell has commentary and some good stuff for today. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. So it sounds like your average 2.5 hours worth of great content on TechStrong TV today. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our first guest.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
There was a time, I remember, when I was at Interliant and some of the vendors I dealt with, they would take you to their innovation center or their centers of excellence where you can see some of the latest and greatest kind of technologies available that you can then bring back and install in your own data center, in your own networks, etc. Of course, with the advent of software as everything, software defined everything, you didn't really need to go to an innovation center for many of the software innovations and technologies that we see. But when it comes to hardware and networks and switches and so forth and other, hardware type of technology, you want to put your hands on it, you want to see it in action, and an innovation center is still a really great way of doing it. Well, Extreme Networks has partnered with one of their VARs in Covington, Kentucky, which is right outside of Cincinnati. The VAR's name is StepCG, and they actually have a pretty big practice in that whole Midwest area there. We met with Rob Huff of StepCG as well as Daniel Dulick from Extreme, and they talked to us about their new innovation center opened in Covington and plans for it, as well as how selling hardware during these unusual times have been for both Extreme and StepCG. So let's now go to my conversation with Daniel Dulick and Rob Huff and check in on Extreme Networks and StepCG.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this segment on TechStrong TV. For this segment, actually, I'm lucky to have two guests with me. Let me introduce you to them. I don't know how it appears on our screen, but Daniel Dulick is from Extreme Networks, and happy to have you join us. Hey, Daniel.
Hi, Alan. How are you? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And the guy with the Mick Jagger rock picture in that background is Rob Huff from StepCG, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Alan. Nice to see you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. So let's start off. As we were talking off mic, Daniel, I think most of our audience is obviously familiar with Extreme Networks. I go back to Extreme Networks when you guys first were founded, and I actually, truth be told, I did an OEM deal with Extreme Networks on network access control with a guy named Herb Schneider, who was one of the co-founders back then of Extreme, a long time ago, and let's leave it at that. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what Extreme's up to these days?
Sure, and really in the context of the new world we're living in, right? We call the new normal. It really is quite an exciting time because technology's in everybody's lives. It's how we work. It's how we socialize. It's how we, in our own personal lives. Technology is the common thread that links all of us together. And what we found is, and what we're all living in real time, is every business, every educational institution, every part of society is having to rethink about how they deliver or support their product or service or communication. And people are having to rethink on how do they use technology to do that. And so it really is forcing, there's a term we use a lot, digital transformation, right? This is one of those kind of buzzwords, industry buzzwords that's been around for many years, but it's kind of been an optional thing, but now it's required, it's mandatory. And so it really is forcing all of us, certainly in the technology industry, to really think about how do we offer and continue to offer the technology, the support, the services that we all need to function, because the world doesn't stop because of COVID. And so that's the balance we have to strike here. So it's a pretty exciting time for us.
Very cool. Rob, unlike Extreme Networks, I don't know how familiar our audience is with your company. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you, man, take 5 minutes. Really, let's get us up to speed on what you guys do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. So StepCG it's a value-added reseller and system integrator. We kind of like to say we're a value-added reseller that's not an oxymoron, right? So we truly want to add value. The business was founded. We founded it about 5.5 years ago now, and the whole concept was to build an organization around engineering. We saw so many customers out there that couldn't get the ball into the end zone using sports analogies. They may get it to the 10-yard line, but they couldn't get it into the end zone. And there just wasn't a tremendous amount of help on the channel and the partner side to do that very advanced engineering. And that's really what we built the business upon. And the market has responded really well. We grow, we double in size every year. And our culture is one of sharing information and being a good teammate and partner to both the manufacturer as well as the customer. So when it comes to our customer side, we're really big on education. We're really big on sharing knowledge. We don't want to be that company that you have to call to set up a VLAN and we send you a bill. We're going to feed you the information. We're going to give it to you. We want to be part of your team, and we really want to help our customers be successful. What we saw environments 10 years ago that they were managing hundreds of devices. Fast forward to today, they're managing, thousands or tens of thousands of devices. And now even with COVID-19, we're trying to address a remote type of option and offering, and how do we provide secure connectivity? And we always like to be innovative. We always like to think outside the box. Empowerment is everything. Empowering our employees, empowering our customers to make things happen. And really, at its core, and our core value, it's about empowerment. It's about education, and being a true teammate and player. So really, that's who StepCG is at its heart. We operate throughout the Midwest and the South, provide secure infrastructure and really innovative solutions. In Extreme Networks, in my opinion, is the most innovative manufacturer in the network infrastructure space. So naturally, it's a match made in heaven. And we've experienced tremendous growth thanks to the partnership and the relationship we have with those guys. So,
very cool. Thanks for bringing us up to date on that, Rob. It's good to know. And you're right. For too long, or in too many cases, VAR wasn't an oxymoron, right? It was just where was the value? But I think things go one of two ways today. Either everyone is in a self-serve world, right, where they do a SaaS app, they don't read no manuals, right, and it's self-serve, right, and it's direct self-serve. And then there are certain things, setting up networks is a prime example, where you're not doing it yourself unless you're some Fortune 50 company maybe that has like a huge IT infrastructure team and is with a bunch of Extreme certified engineers, let's say, or with another company, and you want to take it's not for the faint of heart. You leave that stuff to engineers who know what the heck they're doing, and because otherwise you just pay what I call idiot taxes. Right, you make mistakes, and it winds up. Every one of those mistakes costs you money. And if you would have just paid the money up front, it's cheaper and faster, and you get on with your business. That being said, though, let's move on to what we want to talk about here today, and that is that you guys recently opened up an innovation center. Is that what you're calling?
That's
right,
correct.
Center of Innovation, and it's in northern Kentucky.
Covington, Kentucky. Yep.
Covington, which is not far out of Cincinnati, correct? Or
No, actually, the Innovation Center, we're positioned to look into both Paul Brown Stadium and Great American Ballpark. of which
Yep.
there's nothing going on right now. But it's certainly a beautiful.
Please don't remind me. I'm a Steelers fan. Paul Brown Stadium's not one of my favorite places at the Jungle there, but
This all the time.
yeah. Well, Ben's never lost. When we talk Mick Jagger, we'll talk Steelers Bengals. It's another story. But anyway, what are you guys doing at this innovation center?
One thing that we always continue to look at is our why. What is our why? And our why for the Innovation Center is, to put quite simply, it's to show people what's possible. It's where innovation meets execution, which basically means, come in here, put your hands on it, and we're going to show you what's possible. Because so many times, bleeding over from your comments you were making, one thing hasn't changed in most of these companies that as I said, we're managing hundreds of devices. Now they're managing thousands, and they still have the same amount of support folks, if not less, supporting that, right? So what we want to do is we want to give people the opportunity to come in and see what is possible for their infrastructure, see automation, truly get to put your hands on and see machine learning and self-healing infrastructures. How can you do more with less? And it's one thing to go through a PowerPoint, because we all have seen some pretty awesome PowerPoints. But what we want to do is we truly want to be that area that people can come see what's possible, put their hands on it, and truly understand when we say where innovation meets execution, what exactly that means.
Yep. Now, I'm going to safely assume that Extreme Networks and the capabilities that their infrastructure provides is a star at the Innovation Center. But give us an idea, what other than Extreme, what other kinds of technologies are on display there?
Yeah, so Palo Alto, we have a great relationship with Palo Alto and a lot of integration because security is not going anywhere. It's our ability to secure infrastructures and devices are becoming more and more important. So practice around both Palo Alto and Fortinet. Cradlepoint is a huge partner. We actually have a depth of knowledge in the wired space, the wireless space, and the LTE space. So Cradlepoint is an edge router, really addressing IoT infrastructure, IoT needs. You're going to see a lot of cloud voice and cloud sensor type solutions on display. And then you're also going to see up, running, live, and active private LTE deployments. So we're going to be deploying private LTE on the new CBRS spectrum here as well, so that you can see physical security devices, cloud-based physical security devices like Verkada and access control on display, talking to private LTE and Wi-Fi 6. And how you can leverage both of those technologies in a manufacturing, government, or education environment, providing students access to the internet in their houses, for instance. Those are some of the projects that we're rolling out, and we're going to be able to demo and display all of that here. And then there's a whole nother aspect, which I hope we get into, which is the educational side of it. And at the heart of everything we do, it always comes back to education. Because in our opinion, education is power, and we want to continue to drive more young people into the IT workplace, as well as retrain some of our aging workplace that their cheese got moved. Their cheese got moved, and we want to help them find that cheese, right?
Absolutely. So, we actually have a whole section on DevOps.com that we call IT as Code, and it's really, Rob, right to that. That's what it's about. So all of these people, the IT generalists, in my time, the guy who ran the Exchange server or the AD server or the network guy, the firewall guy, the people who used to make our offices work. Right there, as we are moving to the cloud and we're adopting all these new technologies you're talking about, their world has changed, right? They're learning. They've got to learn how to do some coding now. They got to learn how to, do scripting. They've got to learn new languages, new technologies. And that's really what IT as code is all about. These people are, they're not developers. No one's claiming they are, but they need to be much more code savvy, script savvy, whatever you want to call it, than 20 years ago, 15 years ago even. And it's a big change for them. And it can be scary because a lot of them think they're going to lose their job.
Absolutely. I mean, we see it every day. You talk about APIs and the power of APIs and true integration, and that's what you speak of, right? It's whether it be, Python is a big one now, right? So it's there's a great organization out there that I recommend everybody looking at. It's Coding for Girls. It's trying to get females into coding. It's a wonderful program. So to your point, you're right on. It's a lot of scripting. It's a lot of APIs, and integration in AI is everything. It's a competitive edge.
Absolutely. Daniel, what gets you excited about Extreme being in this innovation center?
Well, and Rob said it early on, and Rob, I think you nailed it around where innovation meets execution, because that's exactly what we're talking about in the IT industry. IT's role and function isn't just about learning new technologies and adopting technologies. Its purpose is to help, call it, lubricate the business, if you will, for which they work. How to offer better services, more streamlined services, more self-service services. Alan, you mentioned that, and this is really where, and in my humble opinion, this is where education and innovation in education bridges that gap between innovation and execution. It is the bridge. And, partnering with StepCG, we're bringing forth all of these concepts around the network is more than just plumbing today, right? And network is often seen as a commodity, much like electricity. You plug it in, you connect more Wi-Fi, you just expect it works, right? You couple that with certainly the younger generation coming in, they're used to these things. They were born with these devices now in their hands. The new talent coming into the IT world doesn't know what it was like before one of these things existed.
Yeah.
And
digital natives.
That's right. And they expect to do their jobs in the IT workforce, meaning offering services, troubleshooting, deploying new applications, all through one of these. And it's a complete shift that again, we as a vendor have to be very cognizant of, because the landscape on how networks are designed, operated, troubleshoot, we have to use machine learning and artificial intelligence, because the next generation workforce is going to have a set of expectations. And it's really they want UI driven point, and just like on an app, right? They don't want to get into code. They don't want to write scripts, right? And so that's the spectrum we're working with is, kind of bringing, and Rob, you called it out, really, is helping, call it, the more legacy or heritage operations, IT operations of workforce kind of adopt to a new way, as well as the new workforce coming in. And so it's quite a spectrum here. And I really believe at the crux of it really is going to be adopting some of these big data technologies like machine learning and AI that can automate a lot of the mundane work that used to be very manual, going forward. So it's pretty exciting for us, being in this sphere of innovation around machine learning and AI, because I really do believe a great use case is network infrastructure around security, availability, optimization, kind of all these things wrapped up into one. So we're excited working with StepCG to help, seed some of this technology and innovation into their innovation centers, and partnering on building curriculum to help not only our current IT workforce, but also the next generation coming in. So for the community, it's going to be exciting.
Very cool. Nice, Daniel. So, look, I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. COVID, everyone's home. We can't get to the innovation center. How are you bringing the innovation center to them then? Or is it on hold until we can? Or, there's got to be something we could do. It's actually a great use case Rob?
We're launching this fall, come hell or high water, as they say.
Okay.
So we've got the racks full. The interesting thing, Alan, is our ability to deploy infrastructures remotely is extremely powerful. We've done infrastructure deployments all over remotely. We can ship the gear. They get it plugged in. We ship them a Cradlepoint router. We have LTE, out of band management, out of band access, and we can program, right. Our innovation training is very similar. Obviously, we're going to have on-site offerings because that's what a lot of people are looking for. But at the end of the day, our lab, which has over $1 million of extreme gear in it, we're going to have full out-of-band remote access to that entire lab. So, from an instructor perspective, you can really train anybody, anywhere, anytime, any place. And you can even see what they're doing, as you said, as they're typing, right? Whether it be APIs or command line, and you can coach along the way and follow the curriculum. So for us, it's always been an on-site and or remote offering. So really nothing changes. We're going to obviously follow all the state guidelines to a T, with the social distancing, the timing, and number of folks and where they come from. So we're going to definitely do that and follow all the guidelines, both from the WHO and the CDC. But I do envision the soft launch of this being primarily a remote offering. But like I said, we're prepared for that. It's kind of what we do.
Absolutely. Well, no, I think it's a great use case. Hey, let us show you real innovation, right, in doing it and how this can be done remotely. So it works. Guys, we're about out of time. First of all, I want to thank you both for coming on. Thanks to our friends at Extreme for setting this up. And I want to wish you both the best of luck with this. At some point, maybe I'll get up there to Cincinnati to watch a Steelers game and then come check out the Innovation Center, Robin. We could talk Rolling Stones.
Absolutely. Or next time I'm down there in Florida, I'll definitely look you up.
Yeah, don't come to things are pretty bad here right now, but hopefully they'll be getting better. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us on TechStrong TV. Best of luck. This is Alan Schimmel, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Okay, before we start our next interview, I often tell people that I've never met a successful startup or successful startup entrepreneur who didn't think that in some small way what they were doing could help change the world. Nice to haves don't cut it. Must haves are the kinds of ideas and technologies and products and services that you build a company around. This next interview is with Craig Bettis of Hadeon. Hadeon's basic premise is that they are going to, in essence, take the power of a supercomputer and make it available to even individual developers and small teams. So no longer are supercomputers strictly in the realm of large government, university, or Fortune 100 companies. The power of supercomputing can be brought to everyone, and that's Hadeon's goal. And they've been at it for 5 years. They've done some amazing things. They actually have and as Craig is going to talk about in this interview, they have some really large scale customers that are using the technology, and it sounds pretty amazing. I'm going to let Craig tell you more. Let's now go to our interview with Craig Bettis of Hadean.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Craig Bettis, and he's with a new company, or at least a new company for our audience, called Hadean. Hey Craig, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hi Alan, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So Craig, as I mentioned, our audience is, I'm going to think not many people are familiar with Hadean at this point. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes here and really I want you not only to tell us about what Hadean is and what you guys do, but I want to, if you don't mind, try to weave in your own personal journey into that. And because so often, a team takes on the personality of its coach, and so often a founder or an entrepreneur kind of infuses life into the companies that they found and start. So I think it's important for the people to hear your story. So go ahead, take it away, Craig.
Thank you. So Hadean's a deep tech startup based in London in the UK. The sort of founding principles behind Hadean, we wanted to empower the world's best and brightest, anyone who has access to the internet, to empower them with the ability to build the most powerful applications to go out and change the world. I've always believed that innovation is what drives change and change the positive. If you think about it, Alan, in the next 5 years, there's going to be another 3 to 5 billion new minds and people going to be coming online, coming out of emerging markets and third world countries. It's going to bring a knowledge base that, and a power and a creativity that is maybe we've never seen before. And what we want to be able to do is to give those people access to that power. So Hadean fundamentally, Bill Gates once famously said that he wanted to put a computer on everyone's desk. With Hadean, we want to put a supercomputer into the hands of anyone. So they may not have, one of our clients is the biggest game on the planet, Minecraft. Mm-hmm. Many people won't have access to an Xbox or a PS4, but they will have access to the internet. And these people come online. We want to empower them to create applications that were built on the cloud for the cloud. So cloud native applications, but we want them to be able to do that in a way that they can build applications of unparalleled levels of performance, reliability, and scale. So Hadean was built around that principle. How do we enable people to innovate and drive change for the better, and particularly empower this new wave of knowledge workers are going to be coming online in the next 3 to 5 years. What we've done, we've built a platform, the Hadean platform, which enables any application that's built on top of it to be distributed by default. We've built our own cardinal application, an application called Ether Engine, which is a real-time simulation engine. And that simulation engine is being used by the biggest game on the planet, Minecraft. It's being used by one of the greatest life sciences institutes, the Francis Crick, who were using it to do large-scale cancer simulation, and more recently also to run models for COVID-19. And it's also being used by some of the largest banks on the planet as well, who are looking to build composable banking applications while removing many of the constraints they have around their existing infrastructure. So it's a distributed compute platform that allows developers to build cloud-native applications faster and easier, more cost-effectively. And those applications will scale and perform and give you a reliability that is kind of unprecedented as it relates to what's available today.
So nothing too big then. That's fantastic, man. Craig, give us a little bit of your own personal background. How did you wind up at Hadean?
So my background, I've been in and around startups all my career. So I've either done startups, start again, or turnaround work. So I've been in and around the venture world all my career. been part of many successful company exits. I've also been part of and witnessed things when they don't go so well. The last 15 years, I've been in and around automation and DevOps. So really, with Hadean, when we looked at and what attracted me to Hadean, and the reason I came in as a co-founder was these guys really went out and attacked this from the ground up. So the sort of first principles approach was the current technology stack that we're trying to build on is over 40 years old. So it was designed for a different era and a different time. If we're going to be trying to build, applications that are going to drive change in the world, if we're going to build and empower people to build cloud applications, why are we asking them to build on a technology stack that was built for a different era? So that you've got all these layers of complexity that you have to be backward compatible with. So with Hadean, we said, well, we don't need all this middleware and all this bloat. We don't need these layers of abstraction and orchestration and containerization. So what the guys have done, and I'm actually the dumbest guy in the company, right? So
it's always a good thing to be.
Super smart Cambridge and Imperial PhDs. They've come out and they've built this technology stack from the ground up. It's very close to metal. So we've taken millions of lines of code and condensed it under 30,000 lines of code. And what you get as a result is a distributed compute platform that gives you the levels of performance and scale. But from a developer perspective, you build on this. It's easy to build on. You can build much quicker, far more cost effectively. So you're getting like a 15x developer productivity gain, which is why it's so attractive to many of these organizations. So an example of that would be, we were able to build a cloud native game demo. There's a big trend right now around cloud gaming. You see things like Google Stadia, Microsoft xCloud. We were able to work with a company called CCP Games with no background in gaming. And a 7-person team at CCP Games built an MVP game demo of a cloud native game called eVita Wars that was able to go out and break the Guinness World Record, which is their own record, for the most number of players in a single shot game. So 7-person team, 8 weeks, built a game demo that ran 10,000 players live at GDC. So that kind of shows the not just the developer benefits of building on this platform, but the kind of exponential results you can get as a result of doing so.
Sure. So, Craig, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit with you, if it's okay. A VC fellow once told me that, 90% of what we see in our technology world is evolutionary, not revolutionary, and that change is incremental, right? And that sometimes companies who want to change too much, right, who want to, obsolete the powers that be. It's like talking to, power to power, talking truth to power, can sometimes, just the threat of the disruption, if you will, can cause powerful forces in the market to say, hey, wait a second, that's a little too radical. That's a little too, much of a leap. I wonder if you guys, from what you're describing, and I don't know enough to know enough, but is this a bridge too far? Is it too big a leap to tell people, hey, forget that whole stack you've wasted, not wasted, but forget this whole stack we've worked on for 30 or 40 years. You need to, out with the old, in with the new.
So it's a great question, and it kind of ties into why we made some of the strategic choices we made in terms of how do we take this thing to market, how do we get product market fit, how do we show people there's this, how can we, this little company in London, go out and put a 10,000 player game demo that Google Stadia, Microsoft, Epic, Unity, no one's been able to do this. Why can we do this? It's because of the power of the underlying tech. But how do you then take that into production? And you're right, there's going to be resistance to that amount of change just because the cost of change is going to be prohibitive. So one of the things we did when we looked at the challenge with deep tech and sort of game changing tech at that is people are always questioning, hey, does it work? And second is, how hard is it to adopt, and what are the barriers to entry, right? So whilst we have this R&D kernel around Hayden OS, which is our underlying, which is the sort of core of the Hayden platform, we realized that's going to take us a long time to build. And while we're doing that, we need to have validation points to feed into that on the journey. So one of the things we did very early doors was to look at how do we get this into production. So we built, with our process model, we did an abstraction layer over Linux. So we've kind of got an optimized version of Linux as our current production ready product, because that allows us to show people some of the design changes we've made, where we've taken out, some of the bloat and optimized to demonstrate some of the underlying principles that's going into our R&D kernel, how this works. But it's allowed us to go out and engage with the market and get them to accept like a first step. Does that make sense? At the same time, it's allowed us to take those learnings and feed it back into the core products. We build that out. So we had a choice up front. Do we open source Hadium and hope, to your point, that people adopt and get behind it? Or we can take another route, which is let's dog food our product. Let's build our own kernel application and let's learn as we go. And we'll take a little bit of Linux and we'll try and optimize and work with that. So that's the approach we've taken, and it's for exactly the reason you said. The long-term game is to completely move people onto the new Hadian stack, but as an interim step, we're kind of taking that sort of halfway house to allow people to come with us on the journey, see the benefits, both at the application layer and from what we've done in terms of the optimization around Linux.
Got it. So, look, the kinds of examples you've given us here are large scale, right? Huge scale type of environments, projects. But, how small is too small to use something like ADN?
It can be one developer who wants to write the whole.
Really?
The whole premise behind Hadian, where we started with a purpose statement, we want to empower anyone. Hadian effectively makes the internet a giant supercomputer for anyone that wants to build and write on it. So if you want to write a single developer wants to write an algorithm, but he wants that algorithm to scale without having to, be sat next to his supercomputer, have to worry about huge cloud or server costs, right? It just scales as and where you need it. So with Hadian, it's very much about empowering anyone, from a single developer all the way up to a large enterprise, as we've discussed. But it's giving you that compute power without all the operational constraints and costs that you would normally have to be associated with. So single developer, 10 developers, an enterprise, that's Hadian. It's empowering anyone and giving them that supercomputer-like capability, if you like, to build and scale.
I mean, just think about it, right? So growing up, and I first got into the technology business, of course, the gold standard for supercomputers was the Cray machines. And, I think there were probably 4 supercomputers in the world or something, back then. And then Cray, of course, people could actually buy a supercomputer. And then, with the advent of Linux and parallel processing and all of these things, we started seeing supercomputers come into the realm of reachable for large universities, government kind of entities, large corporations. To be able to sit here and say, we're going to put, in essence, the power of a supercomputer into the hands of any developer who wants it, who can use it, is just, it's really powerful stuff. So,
yeah, and I think Mike Butcher at TechCrunch, kind of, his quote was, Hadian may have just leveled the playing field for every startup or, entrepreneurial developer on the planet, right? And it's kind of tied back to our, as I said, our purpose. We believe to drive change, to make the world a better place. We're going to do that by empowering people to innovate themselves, not by, looking to bail people out or look for, it's this belief in everyone, and let's empower everyone and give them that kind of power to create.
And see what they do with it, right? And let creativity take its course. So, Craig, and my fault, we didn't do a good job in the beginning of laying this out. For people who want to get more information about Haitian, where do they go?
Go to our website, which is www.haitian.com. You can get in contact with us there. They can come to me directly, craig@haitian.com.
Can you spell Haitian, spell Hadean or?
Hadean.
.com. Excellent. Now, Craig, where I know, with startups, have you guys announced funding yet? Are you, where's the company from that point of view?
So the company has it's been going for 5 years.
Okay.
We've raised, but really, it's been fundamentally, really grown as a company since 2017. So since then we've raised $16.35 million US. We are currently a 50-person team based out of London and Cambridge. We're now gearing up off the back of the success we've had with the technical proof points around the technology and the commercialization across gaming, life sciences, and financial services. We're now gearing up for our Series A. We're looking to raise more money towards the end of this year. We're in good shape despite the economic downturn, the sort of global pandemic. We're fortunate that many of the markets we serve are quite buoyant right now. So gaming is very buoyant, healthcare and life sciences are very buoyant, and sort of government and synthetic training and simulation is also very buoyant. So
absolutely. Well, I mean, tech in general, Craig, I tell people this all the time. I consider myself personally be blessed, but all of us in the tech industry, though we've seen hard times with this, compared to other industries, tourism, or some of the other things that have really been just shut down, the whole hospitality industry, we've been relatively unscathed. And I've spoken to tech executives who say, man, we're looking forward, anybody, any developers who are getting laid off, we view this as an opportunity. We can finally start filling some of the open recs out there, right? And so, yeah, I mean, count our blessings over in the tech industry with that. It is what, it could be a lot worse. And there are people who are truly, truly, truly suffering economically, as well as those who suffer from the disease and everything. Anyway, Craig, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for introducing us to Hadean today. It's HADEAN.com for anyone interested. We'd like to, we scratched the surface here in 20 minutes, but we need to maybe take a deeper dive. Maybe we do some follow-up traditional article or blog kind of post on this and bring it out to people. I'd like to understand more about what the developer experience is and stuff like this. But for now, hey man, thank you very much for joining us from London, and stay well and keep doing what you're doing. It sounds like such an exciting
project. We're gearing up and hiring. So if there are people out there looking for work, to the point you just made, reach out to us. We're about to open a US office this year, so yeah.
Great.
If they're good people,
where in the US,
It's confidential at the moment, but it'll be close to where most of the cloud guys are, because we have good partnerships with all the cloud players. So
okay,
there's a hint.
Yep. Sounds good. Hey, Craig, thank you so much. That's Craig Bettis. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Craig,
take care.
You too. Craig Bettis from Hadean here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
As I said at the top of the show, one of my favorite people in the DevSecOps space is our next presenter. Shannon Leeds literally started DevSecOps.org and the DevSecOps Manifesto along with a few other folks, but she was kind of the driving force for it. I've had the pleasure of having Shannon present at several RSA DevSecOps events that we've done over the years, as well as a lot of our virtual events. She's always there to lend a hand. But on top of that, you know, she's really a role model for women and diversity in the cyber space. She's also a role model for how we bring security to developers, right? And which is the essence of DevSecOps. What was always interesting about Shannon is she actually manages in the development side of the house, not necessarily security, where she leads a team at Intuit. Really, really sharp woman. I think you're going to like this presentation she did at TechStrong Con recently, which is aligning security for an automated business. So let's now go to Shannon Leeds from our TechStrong Con conference just earlier this month on aligning security for an automated business.
Hi, this is Shannon Leeds. I'm here with TechStrong Conference, and I'm going to talk to you today about DevSecOps and aligning security for an automated business. Really excited to be here today, and so excited about having some opportunities to help the community to get educated and to share information and knowledge during these hard times. So let's get started with my slides. So a little bit about me. Actually, a little bit about me. My journey's been, going on for quite some time. I'd say most people consider me to be a tech dinosaur. I've been doing this since the mid '80s. It's really odd to say that, right? Some of my interests as a human, I like to always kind of put these things up and have a little bit of fun. I have a couple of girls. They like to do ballet. I'm big into STEM because with little girls, it's a thing that I really am passionate about and helping them to further their careers as they grow up. I build comic strips. Some of them are known, some of them are not known. I also love to kickbox, so that's what I do with my time on the side. I spend a lot of my days with DevSecOps, Intuit, IANS, and Hacker Girl, and working in the industry to help with things that are difficult challenges. I really do enjoy trying to solve hard problems. A quick shout out to Dear Auditor. If you're not familiar with the work these folks are doing, I'm really proud of the DevOps community for acknowledging that we need to try and get security to be part of what we do as part of our practices, and also for some of the things that are really difficult to audit nowadays. As we move to cloud and containers and we get faster with how we do technology, we need to be mindful of adding controls to our technology to keep it safe. Also, another shout out to the OAuth Foundation for all of the cool work that they're doing. I'm really exceptionally proud of some of the work that they're doing around APIs and some of the new stuff that they've added. Really important to go see it. Check out their new API security project. One final shout out to the change.org group for putting out petitions. Right now we're in the middle of trying times, and this life mattered. Having the ability for my children to see somebody be murdered on tape for me was something that I felt that I need to add to this. And so if you can, please do me a favor, go out and sign this petition. We do need to see justice. This life mattered. So quick overview. Let's get into my talk. I'm really excited about this talk, particularly because I've been working on DevSecOps for a very long time. I've been working on DevSecOps at Intuit now for almost 8 years, and that's really great to say because it's the longest job I've ever had. So you can tell that I'm highly passionate about what I do at Intuit. I currently run their adversary management capability, and it's an important part of what we think about and do. So let's set some context for this talk. So real quick, I told you I like to do comic strips, and for me, this was a little bit of a comic strip. I was watching, My Weight at one point, and I still am, but I tend to read nutrition facts labels a lot. And I thought it would be kind of cool to bring some awareness to the fact that we need to understand the security in our software. So I started creating sort of what I thought might be a security facts label. I've seen a few other versions of this, and I really love when people take ideas like this and further it. I'm very proud of that type of thing. I think it's really important for us to realize, however, that software isn't just made to be perfect when it comes to a security person's view of it, but essentially it needs to become much more adversary resilient. And so adversary interest really matters, and this is something that I think that we have to take into consideration as we build software as practitioners. So real quick, everything is about business, the things that we do, the problems that we solve, all of the interesting and challenging work that we further, the ability to make automation happen for things like healthcare issues, the technology that we employ to make our lives easier or be able to do more or faster things that we're trying to solve for humanity. All of that's wrapped up in business. And business has been brought to us over the years, brick and mortar businesses, small businesses, the ability to share. All of that's wrapped up in this concept of being able to exchange for value. And so business is really about trying to create value for the exchange of it. Technology has been born to really help us to further our business challenges, and technology itself is really an immediate capability that we've been able to put into practice so that we can make business better and faster. When you bring these two together, we call it digital transformation. You've seen this somewhere along the way if you are a technology practitioner of any sort. For DevOps purposes, digital transformation is really about how we've brought some of the operational capabilities of business together with the technical advances of software development. And along the way, you've heard people say, we need to add the CIO position or the CTO position or the technology position essentially to business. And so along the way, we saw the traditional business capabilities, the folks at the top of a business, really be augmented by this new right-hand person that's going to help them to make business better and faster and cheaper. So software is eating the world was said at one point, and now I believe that software ate the world. When your toaster can be enriched or augmented with things like technology or automation, really essentially, haven't we arrived? We have a lot of software out there these days. Everything has technology components to it, whether it be your lights can turn on for you at night, or you have technology to help solve healthcare issues. Pacemakers even have software in them these days. And so it's really important to realize that software ate the world. And so we really have to think about what that could mean. Essentially, business looks a little bit like this. This is a generic view of what it takes to really create a business, move it forward. You have a business plan, you have ideas, products are developed, services maybe even. You find interest in your customers. You help to understand that interest from a use case perspective. Sometimes you have misuse or abuse. And then ultimately that helps you with customers who are using your technology, or they need help, or they need support. And then finally, gains come with that, whether it be new problems to be solved, or it might be monetary, or it even might be demand and usage. You see gains, and ultimately that's the feedback loop of business. When we think about what that has done over the years, essentially, as business proceeded, there were things like abuse and misuse that came up. And so ultimately security got added. And here you can see, if you look at the predict, prevent, detect, and respond model, along the way, really, if you think about it, business had the notion of people who tried to cheat those businesses. And so you would try to prevent bad actors from doing misuse or abuse. And some of those things would be known and detected and responded to. And ultimately, that created this notion of business and security back in the day. Well, along the way, essentially, when you think about how we might practice business, evolution happens. Things like compute start to trend towards cloud. And thankfully, if you look at Agile, it really is in the heart and soul of this picture, because it has been what has changed and transformed business in a way that we can see that technology is needed so that we can move faster, that we can solve bigger and better problems. And with that polarity change have been other things that actually have to be changed. I haven't changed this picture in a while. I've been using this for quite some time. I found Simon Wardley a long time ago. And as a Wardley map goes, this one has been pretty pervasive. And I'm in the middle of updating it. What you can see here is that once upon a time, DevSecOps was being pulled forward towards commodity by things like traditional security, not keeping up with Agile and not keeping up with the cloud, and not even really being connected to either of those in a way that they were going to make for a good transition. So DevSecOps has become bigger and better, and you can see some other things that I've forecasted and predicted: security as code, fewer, better suppliers, transparent security, rugged software. Not just rugged security, not just rugged DevOps, but rugged software itself, and this notion of resilience. So with that said, if the Simon Wardley map is right, then essentially business has been trying to get this digital transformation to come to bear. And automation and software are really being added to business at an unprecedented level. You can see the sophistication of business getting better. As an example, we're in the middle of a pandemic and you can get your groceries delivered. Businesses are not completely offline. You see restaurants being able to deliver to their customers. And we're starting to look at this way of living as in a different way. There's a lot of folks that could essentially gain from the things that we're being plagued by. And ultimately, with automation and software, we can solve a lot more problems. I was just mentioning to somebody the other day that it's become hard to be a working mom with children at home and being able to take care of the family that I provide for. And also, be able to do shopping. Shopping seems to be different now, and it's more difficult to walk down the aisle than walking down the aisles of the supermarket. Instead, I'm having to walk down those aisles in my mind, and I think that there's going to become a lot more advances and problems that people have to solve as part of this new normal. I don't think we're going backwards. And so if you think about going forward, that means that this notion of automation and technology and security needs to be added together. So taking what you learned from prior business models and really adding in that predict, prevent, detect, respond to automation and software, and ultimately adding things in like risk and loss. Those elements are really important and critical in here. So if we take this step forward and we move towards this new model, and we look at what has been adapted and how we're going to be able to look at and make decisions as software practitioners, I think it's essential to understand the responsibilities between business and security, and that's what this picture depicts for you. I've added in predict, prevent, detect, and respond. If that seems familiar to you, it's because you can go out and get a lot of this information from Gartner and NIST and a variety of other standards providers that are out there trying to help you to understand what kind of controls you'll need. I've paired them with some of the things that happen in business, like to predict, you really do need to understand the ideas that are coming forward and what it would mean to have adversary interest or losses and how you could essentially create more resilience. And so this, to me, this picture is about creating the right level of resilience for business and ultimately aligning your risk tolerances and thresholds to the business plans that we all have. So with that said, if you think about moving things forward, there's always been a little bit of a challenge between dev, ops, and security. And I think the reason why is because when you look at dev and ops, it was clear that they were going to align more tightly than even with security. And the reason why is because both dev and ops are really aligned towards speed of business and ensuring the availability, reliability of software, increasing speed to market, increasing speed of solving problems. Versus if you look at a security practitioner and what they're aligned towards, usually it's perfection and making sure that things are safe and achieve the right level of security so that we can avoid having adversaries really take advantage of these interesting new attack surfaces that a business has. Ultimately, when we really think about what we have to do to align all of these efforts, we have to get confidence that we're building safe software and that we're actually bringing these two notions together. Everything can't be 100%. You can't have software that meets the needs of speed and business and ultimately achieve the 1% perfection that tolerance that a security practitioner wants to have. And so ultimately, when you look at that, you basically move towards something where you're building security in. And this notion of building security in has to be done not just inside the CI/CD pipeline, but really as part of the core of business. So I've added some other things to the normal CI/CD you can see in here. As an example, design time. I don't often see CI/CD pipelines where the design time is really considered. This is where you might have things like prototype and prototype management. Ultimately building things like attack maps once those come through. I was inspired about a model like this when I saw how Pixar does what it does, where there's a lot of exchanges and handoffs between different groups within the company to be able to create some of the most impressive videos and movies that we've ever seen. And so when you start to think about how you might line these up and how people might come together to further software and build it in a way that not only does it create value and availability, but it also instills trust and confidence. This is a natural evolving life cycle that has a lot of data in it and also a lot of feedback loops, and we have to get better at that. So if we think about that, what is it that happens along the way? You start to give away this notion of decisions and cool, we've got this, right? Once you've kind of, figured out how you're going to come together in a CI/CD pipeline, bringing tools into the pipeline, making things automated, getting more secure. The idea here is that we're all working together. But sometimes, and this is the hard part, sometimes a one-line mistake happens. You didn't understand it, know that it was happening, couldn't plan for it, couldn't test it out of existence. And ultimately, that 1% that you might have taken a risk on, it could come to bear. And so if you look at, how that could take place, there's a lot of companies that have had these one-line mistakes with unforeseen results, bad things happening to them. There are other companies that have had these things happen and they've gone out of business. And we have to keep in mind that our job of bringing security to the forefront of these businesses and to make sure that it's involved and baked into technology is really about trying to eradicate mistakes in a meaningful way. So, if we think about that and we think about our decision makers and we really try to align security to business, we have to find a way to make it so that security is accessible for everyone. It can't be that we have to become security practitioners, everyone in the world, at a level of fine level of detail and minute detail, if you will. We've got to find a way to genericize and also make it so that people can get good at small parts of the overall total. And so, we could do this. We could do the controls approach where we have thousands of controls and sub-control requirements. That's happened pre-cloud, and I think you probably remember a lot of these things if you've seen them before. Hundreds of pages of documents. The PCI DSS is formidable. NIST, also formidable. ISO, a bit genericized, but also has a lot of different parts of the puzzle. And what you can see here on the bottom part of this is that that's really about attack surface. We have to get good at figuring out how we control our attack surface as companies, as practitioners that are building software, as practitioners that are defending software. We have to wrap our minds around where could bad guys take advantage of our businesses? And that's not just the software we build, but everything that we do. So with that said, complexity and speed and security, how do you balance all of this out? At one point I heard that we need to balance security as an ility, and that was meaningful to me. I didn't really understand it at first. I think that there's some folks that have really brought a lot of dev and the heart of dev and the heart of decision making in dev to my mindset. And when I have heard people talk about, who's the enemy of whom, this picture of this triad of speed, complexity, and security, commonly speed and complexity are the enemy of security, the way a security practitioner thinks about it. And for those that are wrapped around speed, complexity and security are the enemies. And ultimately, if you add speed and security together, the real enemy of all of it is complexity. And I'm not saying that everything can be simple, but I do believe that if you simplify things, you can get to the heart of what makes them really important. And the things that become very important are the things that actually get the most attention. We have to find a way to make it so that we can simplify and prioritize. So for that, I think that it's important to think about sort of the real world. And this is a builder slide, so I'm just going to try and build it up fast. Once upon a time, I did a talk at RSA, and this is something that you can go listen to. I spent a lot of time doing research around the OWASP top 10, and my belief was, hey, if this is true, and we would normally see that these things are broken out to be a top 10, injection attacks should have a number of adversaries and IPs associated with them. And the perceived success should be very high if this is totally a challenge for the software industry. And I think as you kind of look at all of these, basically rationalizing how they came together and what they were, what was interesting was to start looking at the data for what we really see. Scanners that are out there spend a tremendous amount of time trying to prove injection and security misconfigurations and cross-site scripting and XXC and all these different things that you could have in security serialization. The number of adversaries and IPs have been relatively small, and the perceived success also relatively small. So they bundle down there in the left-hand bottom quadrant. And I think that it's important to know that when you add in things like researchers, they spend a lot of their time in things like subdomain takeovers, null byte exceptions, and even cross-site scripting. And so I think, watching as this comes to bear, the number of adversaries, again, and those IPs really didn't stand up to what has been pushed as part of a top 10. Ultimately, too, if you look at like paid noise, adversaries that use things like threat evasion, how you actually look at something in your logs and what it looks like, all of that's also important to keep into consideration. But it doesn't line up again. If you look at all the different things, you don't really see it in the OWASP top 10, even though you deal with it. SQL injection does show up within the injection elements. But again, while it might have a number of adversaries and IPs, there's really not as much perception of success. And if you add in advanced adversaries, they spend a lot of their time with very small amounts of IPs under the notion that there's a lot of paid noise, that they can go and do things that are actually more, relevant to what they're trying to achieve. Feature abuse, forceful browsing, even cross-site scripting does come up, but it's to help with things like, fraudulent activity or phishing. And command injection is high on the list of trying to break into and get behind enemy lines, if you will, if you were an adversary. So I think it's really important to understand that this is how things laid out in the real-world experiment that I did. So what's that mean? If you think about all the common mistakes that are out there, this notion of common mistakes, authentication frailties, extended blast radius, deprecation life cycles that are really having a challenge, bad practices, and missed anomalies. Essentially, these are the core 6 that I found to be the most important issues of moving to a software mostly world, right? And how you think about your 1% challenge of trying to get to the point where it's even less than a 1% challenge is really about trying to solve for these things and make them accessible to everyone without having to understand every little tiny attack detail. So with that, the security hierarchy of needs was born, and we've been talking about it for years as a company, both internally and externally, and we wrap a lot of our capabilities around this notion that zoning and containment, this notion of blast radius. I think once upon a time you saw that Rich Mogul, who's been working in cloud and working with AWS for a really long time, he did an article on blast radius after talking with me. And I think it's essential for us to understand that the biggest problems that we have are really about this notion of zoning and containment. You might even consider looking at the Beyond Corp paper that's out there that Google has posed, because as you move into cloudier capabilities, you take advantage of SaaS providers, you're starting to do more third-party arrangements. Zoning and containment has a different capability towards it. You're moving out of your data centers and you're having to get better at asset management, or what we call secure software bill of materials. You're also having to increase your logging and visibility, because detection is part of being able to prevent and respond. And essentially authentication is, and I purposely, we went through this a lot, it's not access management, it's authentication, because essentially that is your decision to identify someone who's allowed to use or exposed to the things that you're providing to them, and having good identity verification and two-factor authentication is part of the puzzle. And finally, the cherry on top, encryption. When I first gotten started with the cloud, everybody thought that if they encrypted everything, they wouldn't have to worry about it. I think there's a little bit of that is a truth, but it also, I think that it can be a bit of a mistake if you're trying to really do more hardened software and defense in depth, which you should be doing no matter where your software is. So I think it's really important to keep it as part of a high priority, but really that cherry on top to solve for it with balance. So let's get into this. I did another talk. You'll see it here if you want these slides. I give the link at the end of this discussion. The security hierarchy of needs is really broken out into some of these smaller things. The 5, I've added 1 on to it. So if you look at the pyramid, you're not going to see resilience. I kind of use that as what I call the diamond, or the ultimate goal. The diamond stuff that you're trying to worry about is really where chained attacks come into consideration. And ultimately, with the 1%, you're driving for better software with this hierarchy model and balancing your considerations. As decision makers who are building software, this means that you really have to have considerations around zoning and containment. You're hardening with purpose. You're not just deciding on open-ended attacks that are actually going to hit your software. You're looking at things where you have to patch and maintain libraries, operating the systems. This notion of evasion is really important for logging, because when you peel apart evasion, which is part of what you see in logs, from the actual attacks, you do get consideration as to everything else that's in this hierarchy of needs. Credentials and identity are really important, and in here you see SQLi. There's no better way than to say that, you know, that this is an injection attack of some sort where inputs and outputs are really core. But let's just say that you missed it. You still need to have encryption around your most sensitive data, so that if you do make a mistake, you have the ability to pull it back. And then insiders, you know, really using encryption as basically a supplemental authentication mechanism in addition, and part of the authorization and access layer. AWS has done some great work where they added authentication and encryption together, so that they created this notion of authentication being the first step and encryption being part of the authorization scheme. And I think that's probably the right way to think about it. More will be done in terms of research over the years to say whether that is true or not. But I do think that that mindset that encryption is part of access management is really essential towards understanding how you keep data safe. So let's apply, Sean. Let's take a quick few minutes to run through what it would feel like to do this. And there's a whole lot of links in this section. Again, I give the link to the entire presentation at the end, so you can go back and take a look at some of those notes in there and the references. I think it's important to get your head wrapped around this capability. So let's go through those. Remind ourselves: common mistakes, authentication frailties, extended blast radius, deprecation life cycles that are challenged, bad practices, missed anomalies, right? These are the things that are the core 6 that we have to worry about. So if we have to worry about those core 6, let's start with the zoning and containment I talked about and really dive in. What are some of the things that you're going to see? Now, I do have a lot of this wrapped around the cloud. You could extrapolate from this notion of the cloud back to your data centers, because you built up your data centers with this notion that there were 4 walls, and as long as your firewall could create a boundary that was akin to the 4 walls, you could keep everything that you cared about inside and authorize everything that was coming in and out of that capability. The same is true for software, but now you might be dealing with something where it's boundaryless. Again, going to the Beyond Corp paper I mentioned from Google, zoning and containment now has really changed in a way that we have to understand what is most important to our companies. How do we deal with things like third parties? So this notion of a control plane, an account, or an organization is really essential to establishing that root capability of your company. And then ultimately your cloud accounts or your projects are part of, again, that zoning and containment. Do you have one account where everything's inside of it? Do you have many accounts where you've broken up some of the boundary so that if one thing gets compromised, you still have the other things? That's part of blast radius containment. Virtual private cloud, where you've got the ability to say, again, what's part of your company and how you're actually going to manage it as part of your company, making those things intentionally private. Private endpoints, a lot more of the cloud capabilities out there have really provided these notion of private endpoints. You might have done private endpoints with VPNs in the past, or arranged for private connections between you and another provider so that you can keep it off the internet and inaccessible, and have it be just exchanged in a way that sharing is really part of how you've established, again, an intentional boundary. Whitelist and blacklist, where you've actually allowed some traffic to come in, and you can do that through one of those 2 mechanisms. Lights out or no humans. This idea that you would put into place zoning and containment such that there really is more software control, and the control of software allows you to do things like approvals in line. You might even have standard capabilities, and this zoning and containment is really foundational to everything else. You could have a lot of security controls, and if you get zoning and containment wrong, all those other controls that you might put in place are actually going to be at the mercy of this single thing, because it is the base for the pyramid for how you actually put together those other controls. Without good zoning and containment, everything else is going to be frail or have less success. Next on our list is asset management. Now, I like to say that if you know what's in your software, you have a better chance of securing and defending it. This is hard. There's a lot of technology out there right now trying to solve for the bill of materials. It could be as simple as you put a manifest into your software bill of materials section. You might even have sbom.md in your base capability. There's lots of different manifest types. So you could be using Yarn, or you could be using, some of the other capabilities out there. And the way that you're actually putting files together, like POM files, all of that is actually essential. But remember, too, that asset management is about understanding how to keep your software secure, how to know what's in it, how to keep it up to date with the patches that might come through. When somebody finds a security issue, you being able to know whether or not you need to do something about it is really part of the asset management experience. So let's jump in. So asset management and software bill of materials is critical to your security success. Say that 10 times fast, right? Resource mapping is essential. So knowing what you have, having a resource understanding. If you're a big company, this resource mapping might become sort of akin to like a CMDB, although I don't know that CMDBs really do a good job yet of bill of materials. But I do think that there's some emerging thought process around how a CMDB and some of these library repos might come together. And I think you're going to find that with asset management and software bill of materials, that you could have billions or trillions of things that you have to keep safe. And so there's a lot of responsibility in this particular area. Continuous asset registries, service catalogs, central repos. So not just letting people go out to the internet and download stuff is essential. Lifecycle management, where you actually help to make sure that things are taken care of. You've got good maintenance practices. And attack surface and drift management. So essentially when you put something together and you have good configurations, you should be checking those configurations as part of your software bill of materials. So I think of this area as something where you might have CloudFormation linting, if you're doing AWS, if you're dealing with GCP or Azure, you might be looking at other types of linting capabilities for some of the configuration management there. If you're looking at your libraries, you might have a library repository where it is essentially got all the vulnerability details in. If you look at what GitHub's done recently with its capabilities and procuring SEML as an acquisition and bringing that new capability to life, when you check in your software, now you actually get an understanding of what vulnerabilities exist from day one. Some companies are, using SNCC as well, and those capabilities are really essential to us having good asset management practices. I think this is another really important next in line to the base of zoning and containment. Understanding what you have has probably been one of the biggest problems that most companies have faced for decades. So solving it has got to be a meaningful problem. Having the ability to rationalize and make decisions through these two priority mechanisms when you see a vulnerability come through gives every decision maker the ability to understand what they're trying to do in terms of their defenses. So let's jump over to logging. Now, a lot of people ask, why did you put logging in the security hierarchy of needs? And essentially, the challenge for a lot of folks is if you don't understand the abuse cases that are coming after your software, you don't understand your adversary interests, you can't be good at making your software more resilient. So it is absolutely essential that we get good at logging, having security traceability, getting good at the notion of securability, just like it's availability, just like it's every other ility. And logging is the way that you do that. It increases your visibility or detection and an understanding of what abuse cases you really do have. So let's jump in. So logging is the linchpin for all security objectives, no matter what you're doing, whether it be predict, prevent, detect, and respond. You've got to have good logging. You've got to have not just logging, but also alerting and correlation. And we talk about this in the security industry. It's usually called SIM, centralized logging, built-in audit trails, integrity and non-repudiation, large-scale transactional logging, real-time querying for those who ever worked with Esper. Having the ability to query in your logs as part of that log stream is really important. And then it should be supply chain centric. If you're not building your logging such that you understand your supply chain, you're probably missing out. So just sending all the junk of logs to one place to be sifted and mined and done forensics on, it doesn't really give the value to logging that it really could have for your company and your capability. Understanding and having feedback loops and really taking into consideration the logs as the preciousness that they are, which is either you did really well, in which case kudos, or as you have problems, being able to understand those problems with speed and scale and being able to take them in to have them considered. We've got to get rid of this notion of having false positives in logging, having better discipline over our decisions as software creators about what we want to log and why, knowing about abuse cases. That's why I added to the ultimate of CI/CD, this notion of design time considerations. Logging should be a design time consideration, essentially. So let's go to the next one, authentication. This is kind of the level 4 here. And authentication is really about a few things. Identity verification, making sure that you're dealing with who they say they are, understanding what it means to have a customer profile, what is a customer, and then ultimately giving them the ability to protect their identity with you with things like two-factor authentication. It's not a friction to have two-factor authentication. It's a ability to ensure that customers understand that this allows them to have a safer experience with you and ultimately deal with the one thing that I think is really important, which is ensuring that they are who they say they are. It gives them the ability to ensure that the authorization that they're passing over to you is really intended. So being intentional about who you're dealing with and what they do with your software is essential and critical. So let's jump right in. Authentication can be your game changer of a security mechanism. I've always believed this, the unified identity that you might have. So as you build your software, you might be doing things like microservices, making sure that identity passes all the way through your software. Who is supposed to have access to what within your software stack, not being lazy about how you deal with identity and being really prescriptive about this notion of what an identity is allowed to do, it allows you to have better, safer software. Adding multi-factor, understanding that passwords are not enough, and that the schemes that we have for reducing friction for customers. I do believe in reducing friction. Multi-factor should be really easy. It should be something that's by design more capable for somebody who's trying to authenticate and prove who they are. But we really do have to continue to add these on and solve for the friction that they create so that we can get better at making it harder for people to impersonate the people that are using your software. Directory services, single sign-on. Again, talking about reducing friction, single sign-on is an amazing capability if done well. And the providers that are out there that are doing single sign-on, kudos to them, because they really are figuring out that if you can log into one place and go from there, you have a better chance of reducing things like phishing and swishing and all the other ishings, right? Identity providers, making sure that we can leverage them in a meaningful way and understand how we're going to do the things that we do with, stuff like social authentication. And then identity verification. The last on the list here is to make sure that we have a way of ensuring that when somebody comes to our sites, that we're actually making sure that we know who they are, or they have the information necessary to sign up with us for making these capabilities come forward. If we look at encryption, it's really essential to, again, treat it like the cherry on top. And encryption is really about being selective at what you're trying to get rid of in terms of attacks. Having the ability to do transparent encryption for things like physical attacks, and going back to what I talked about earlier for the different types of attack surfaces, encryption can be very meaningful, but a lot of people make mistakes about how they add it to their software stacks, and I think that understanding it is part of the battle. So I'm not going to, say that encryption isn't difficult. It is a very difficult concept. It's a very meaningful concept. Encryption by default is really necessary. You've got to get better at this across the industry. We should require encryption by default. It should be something that's easy to use. It should be built in and native, no matter where you are and what you're doing. If you're dealing with, a variety of people out there, they shouldn't have to think about dealing with encryption. It should just be there. Key management should be easy, and it should be something that's native to every platform. Secrets management, again, easy and native. These are all essential capabilities. If you look at what most folks are doing around this space, encryption can be made more difficult with just those two things not being easy to deal with. Customer managed keys, when you need to make sure that you're the only one who has the keys to the encrypted ciphertext that you might be trying to deal with. We're trying to understand as an industry how we might even do ciphertext exchange. I think this has become a critical part of the conversation, that companies like mine and everyone else has to be thinking about how we do ciphertext exchange so that we can get better at exchanging data such that it's kept secured at all times and it can be passed around and used and leveraged in that way. Automated creation and orchestration, encryption is really necessary for making sure that we have the ability to do these things and we're able to control them no matter where the encryption is being applied. It has to be, again, easy and something that somebody can rationalize. So you can see that this framework can make it much easier for people to make decisions. I'm going to just bounce down back to, I've done some mapping to show you that the hierarchy of needs can easily help you with the top 6 here. Common mistakes can easily be solved with things like, zoning and containment, and also logging, and being able to just jump back and forth between these. You can go and look at how they've been mapped up, but I think it's essential to realize that all of the zoning and containment, asset management, logging, authentication, and encryption can be dealt with just these top 6. And the other things as well. So it's really important to understand that by making it easier, more accessible, and categorizing instead of trying to solve for every attack and not understanding where it fits into the puzzle, making it so that you can rationalize your decisions against this type of a framework makes it much easier for people to get things right. So let's jump over, let's measure some success here. Let's take what we learned in these last couple of sections. And, for me, I believe that you can't have serious accomplishments without measurement. So let's do this and let's actually look at the measurement that we could apply. So again, refreshing your memory, going back to say that our CI/CD pipelines should start with design, end with monitoring, have a feedback loop, solve for creating value and availability at speed and scale, and ensuring trust and confidence with speed and scale as well. Knowing that we do these things is really part of the puzzle, right? So what are we going to do next? We're going to actually look at, that attack surface at the top, and then what we're trying to achieve with how we think about zoning and containment. And to take a moment here, if you look at the boundaryless capabilities, there's this notion of what is a privileged part of the company. Even in a boundaryless environment, your privileged areas and access are part of the foundation of the way that you need to think about and rationalize the capabilities of your company. An internal layer where you might be exchanging between privilege and external so that you can have sort of, if you will, a DMZ. And then finally having this notion of what is accessible between your external environment. Using a grid like this can be very helpful, because as you make these decisions and rationalize what you're going to do, there will be inevitably places where you realize that you don't have a good control. Web app, VPC, open to the internet, it could be a problem, right? But maybe in this case, the reason it's green, if you will, is because it's not actually a problem. It was intentional. And so having something where you can rationalize and quickly get through these decisions as a practitioner, as a developer, as a DevOps is, I think, essential to being able to make good decisions that you can justify and defend to your security business partners and legal business partners. So what does measurement have to be able to be good? So if you look at Dev, Sec, and Ops, and did a little bit of research here again, and brought them all together, these 5 common things came up in the conversations between all three. Actionable measurement, common measurement, familiar, simple, and durable. And probably the hardest one in here was the one that I considered to be sort of the ruby jewel, if you will, of measurement, is to understand how to make something familiar to all 3. Because most of the measurement that each one of these 3 dimensions of a job and a responsibility have used over the years have not actually been familiar to each other. And nor have they been common or simple. And as you kind of look out, that makes them less durable and far less actionable. So I go back to, let's solve for some of the things in here for measurement and really think about the requirements. Going back to, what are we trying to achieve? If we have 60 to 80% confidence that we've achieved DevOps and security together, we've actually brought that number in line. You saw that the hierarchy of needs really does help you with 80% of the problems that might be out there that attackers are going to use. And again, that little part, resilience, is really the other 20%. And even when you really start to apply all these percentages together, what you find is that the security issue is a really small problem. And most people don't realize this, but when they talk about edge cases in development, that's actually where the security problem tends to lie, is that the edge case, the way in which we rationalize decisions, is really an important part of this problem. So how do we actually go about measuring it, right? For me, it became very obvious very quickly that we had to look at the way in which we were dealing with security measurement. What's out there right now is things like CVSS, and there's a variety of other measurements. People are looking at the numbers of vulnerabilities or the SLAs associated with vulnerability remediation and all these different things. We chose to also add in something called securability. If you take resilience, if you take the ultimate number, that 100%, and you subtract away exploitability, and I'm going to explain what that is in a little bit. Exploitability is essentially one of the critical of the CVSS scoring capabilities that are out there. I've done a lot of research in my time, and if you look at most risk calculations, you worry about impact versus likelihood. And when you really think about impact versus likelihood, you realize that security practitioners understand likelihood quite well and have always been fascinated by impact. And even some have done well with understanding impact, but may not fully appreciate the likelihood of an attack or the imminency of the attack. And so if you think about all the different ways in which you could rationalize it, exploitability is akin to likelihood. And it's probably one of the harder things to have to solve, because it's kind of a put your money where your mouth is kind of metric, if you will, because essentially it means that if you're going to pressure test any security in a software element, you have to be able to do the testing required. So let's kind of break it apart for a minute here. Exploited targets over total exploitable opportunities. What's that really mean? All the resources have to come to bear. All the things that we're trying to achieve here become the total exploitable opportunities. That's your denominator, if you will. So that means bring in all the assets, all the resources that are part of your software bill of materials, and then look at all the ways in which they're exploitable, bring that into the much pot, if you will. That could end up being, in some cases, a few hundred things, in worst cases, millions of things, right? And then what's your success to move it over that threshold to exploited targets? And that has been one of the reasons why we've done a lot of work to pressure test our software so much with things like red teaming and bug bounties and pen testing and scanners, and really pressuring the system to understand the full aspect of resiliency for software. And then ultimately to get to a percentage, because I really think that it's essential that you turn it back into a percentage. It can't just be some strange number, if you will. It has to end up being something that, again, goes back to being familiar. So if you multiply this by 100%, you get essentially some sort of 5 nines measure. And as we all know, 5 nines has been around for a really long time. If you go back to the 1976 paper that's been written around the Identities, and they were 55, I believe, at first, and probably even hundreds if you ask me, and boiled down into 11 Identities. And essentially, that eventually got to the point where things like availability were being measured by a 5 nines. What's the uptime of a company? And you would actually be looking at a number like this to determine how are you doing. The gold standard of things like cloud environments and some of the stuff that's out there in terms of data centers and colos, and they've all looked at this gold measure of 5 nines for many years. What's the 5 nines measure really of security is something that I think that we're working through as an industry right now. And I've done a lot of research, and I've found that instead of 99.999, it's actually 99.86, which I thought was a really interesting number. But if you do some research, you look out there, you look at the common standards that are out there, you look at the data coming back, quite often the really good companies are kind of hovering around 99.86. I've done a couple of other talks around this. You can go look for some of that. I've got some research in some of those talks as well. And what I would tell you that you break your securability down into is resource coverage and test coverage. So this goes to looking at the denominator and the numerator. What is it to have resource coverage is really about finding your assets and doing the things necessary and building a catalog and ultimately tracking those assets. So if you find catalog and track your resources, you'll essentially have kind of a software bill of materials. And again, you could do some of this with things like the traditional CMDBs that are out there. You can pull those things together if necessary. Test coverage, framing, mapping, and advancing things is really also part of this. So understanding what you have in terms of that total asset exploitability, and then mapping how those might come together, and advancing your capabilities around testing will allow you to really pressure test resilience and move things from the bottom denominator to the top so that they can get dealt with and handled. So what's it all mean? So to kind of boil down every bit of this conversation today, what does it mean? P0 incidents are really about being pwned. So if you have a P0 incident, you're going to end up with potentially having an adversary that attacks it, and you should clean those up now. Those are the ones that are the high priorities. They're going to end up in that urgent quadrant. They're going to be the ones that you should be most intentional about from design all the way through. And everything else, the way that I think about securability is it preserves your ability to do regression testing. If your securability is at a meaningful level and you're constantly doing the right things, then when an adversary comes through, you're essentially, you've pressure tested your environment so much all the way from design, which means you've built security in along the way, that you shouldn't have a lot of things that end up in the numerator. And so this allows you to be more successful by putting something like this into practice. And having a KPI like this means, what if you were to try it out? If you had, your 5 nines here and you had one exploitable target that got exploited, and ultimately your total opportunities for that were 5, so commonly 1 out of 5. You calculate your exploitability, 0.2. And this means that your securability magic is applied. And it means your securability for whatever that target was that got exploited was 80%. So essentially it means that 80% of the time you're doing okay, so long as you don't have a lot of adversaries, your security might be enough. But let's just say that you had a lot of adversaries coming through. Would you be comfortable with 80% resilience when you're being attacked? And more often than not, when you really look at it like this and you rationalize it as a decision maker, the answer is no, you're not actually okay with this, and you have to get much better at it. So no 9, which is what 80% is. It can look a lot like this when you're graphing it out. And I didn't put all of the dimensions of the 9s here, but I will tell you that when you actually start to look at something and you're trending for success, when you see a dive and you're trying to get yourself back out of it and you're making decisions as a company, you're trending for success, you're looking at how you're doing, you might be bringing in a new capability and all of a sudden having to re-rationalize how you deal with securability over time. Measuring is part of that battle. So like some insights about how do you apply all this together and how do I kind of wrap up the whole conversation in one big bow. So if you had, low exploits and high exploitable opportunities, you're probably doing pretty good, but you may want to be focused on zoning and containment. Let's just say that you have high exploited targets and low exploitable opportunities. Your biggest opportunity then might be asset management. In the case of high exploited targets and high exploitable opportunities, you might have a zoning and containment problem. And so if you think about how you can use the measure and the Sean framework together, that security hierarchy of needs, you get to have this ability to rationalize your decisions and make better decisions without having to get into the nuts and bolts and details that every security practitioner is spending their time on. And I think it's essential to realize that the harmony between DevOps and security is really about bringing out the science of all, right? And being able to leverage it. So thank God we have a lot of security practitioners that are out there trying to push on what every attack is and get it enumerated. Having a place to put all that information so that it can come together like this is really essential. Knowing what resources are being brought into the software bill of materials, having the ability to put the opportunities that have to get tested and testing them for understanding of exploit means that your company can rationalize whether it needs to or wants to take the risk that it's actually purporting. And I think this makes it more crystallized and discernible for a business person because now the KPI, the way in which you operate, the ability to bring decisions together essentially aligns at full scale. So what's next on my list of things to do with my time and research? I'm working on this notion of sustainable resilience. What does it mean to invest in security capabilities and security solutions that everybody can use in your company, that they can add to their software, and really measuring it? And so I'm working on this new measure to add to my securability suite of measurements, and sustainable resilience will be in one of my talks at some point. I'm going to wrap up real quick and tell you that I've got some resources in here and references. I mentioned earlier that you can get the link to this talk. Here you can find it. It's basically dso.2/TechStrong-2020. I'm really excited about hearing from all of you. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got some other things in here that you can go out and check out. And one in particular you should check out would be the DSO talk here for automated compliance. A partner and I have put forward a way in which we might operate controls with scale and bring that into the CI/CD process. And again, usual shout out to Simon Wardley. Without you, I don't know if I would have been able to pull all this together and really bring forward some of these emerging talks and capabilities. So big shout out.
Thanks very much to Shannon for that presentation at TechStrong Con. As I mentioned, Shannon's always willing to chip in and present at many of our virtual events and so forth, as well as our physical events when we were doing them. So many, many thanks to her. Let's now take a quick look at some of the articles and headlines over on DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. Over on Container Journal, we have Espagion adds Azure Kubernetes support to observability platform. good stuff, and I like to see Kubernetes on Azure. Kubernetes and Kafka, the combo for data ops success. I know that they're both two very powerful communities here, and I think it can be something. Go check that article out. Over on DevOps.com, we have 1,000 salutes to SREs, unsung heroes of the pandemic. This is an article by some of the folks at Citrix, and I love the article. Go check this out and let us know what you think. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And then finally on Security Boulevard, we have cyber stalking, eBay execs vengeance result in prosecution. I don't know if you've been following this story with what went on with some of the eBay folks' retribution to some complainers or dissidents, whatever you want to call them. But what they did certainly crossed the line, and it looks like it crossed the line into even criminal behavior, and rightfully so if what I've been reading is true. So check that article out. And then also, we've settled into working from home, but cybersecurity challenges are far from over. Amen. I think there's a lot we're still learning and need to learn there, and we will find out more in the days and weeks ahead. But for now, those are our headlines for today. As I always say, it's just 5-6 headlines. There's so much on all three sites. Please check out Container Journal, DevOps.com, and Security Boulevard to stay up on the latest, or just sign up for our newsletter. There's actually separate newsletters for each site. But sign up for the ones you're interested in, and this way you're guaranteed to stay on top, as well as watching TechStrong TV every day. All right. With that, let's head over to Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has two features today. One is an interview, and one is a preview of our webinars coming up this week on MediaOps. And I think you're going to want to watch them both. Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back everybody to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with Will LaSala, who is the Senior Director of Global Security Solutions at a company called OneSpan. Hey, Will, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
Charlene, great. It's I'm happy to be here. Good to see you. Happy to speak with everybody about everything that's happening in the world today.
Awesome. Wow. Well, not everything, but maybe some things. Let's start by you telling me about OneSpan, because I'm not really familiar with the company.
Yeah, sure. So OneSpan's a digital authentication, mobile security, risk analytics, risk and fraud analytics company providing digital signatures and digital solutions to banks that then go out and use this solution towards their customers, their consumers, and corporate customers. So a lot of what we're doing is protecting the digital identities of the consumer base out there.
All right. Great. I imagine a lot of what you're doing is pretty popular these days with everybody forced to stay home and work from home.
Yeah, I mean, digital signatures have absolutely exploded, right? I mean, with everybody staying home, you can't make it to the branch, you can't sign your mortgages. So yeah, absolutely. Digital signatures are huge.
Yeah. Well, when we're talking about the pandemic, it's more than just folks working from home. The economy has just been ravaged by this, and so many folks are now out of work and applying for unemployment benefits. But your organization has seen kind of a spike in ID fraud and what do they call it? Synthetic identities. So tell me a little bit about that. What have you guys seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, synthetic identities has really been a massive kind of increase here in the first half of the year and now towards the middle of the year here. A synthetic identity is when an attacker is getting real information and combining it with fraudulent information to create new accounts and that they can then use for attacks. It's been kind of an interesting and kind of a banner year with these attacks. Is really just a burst of it. What we kind of saw was an interesting trend really in the beginning of the pandemic where a lot of users were oversharing. So what they'd see is, the hackers would actually go out there and they'd make these things on social networking. And so with everybody being laid off and everybody working from home, users got bored. and they needed a way to kind of talk with everybody and still stay connected. But the hackers preyed on that. And so we saw very early in the pandemic these launches where it kind of looked the same. It looked like a form mail where you'd go in and, and you fill out some personal questions like, what was your first car? And you'd answer that.
Mm-hmm.
And, what was my first dog's name? And people posted it by the millions out there. But the thing was, because it was a form mailer and it was always the same format, it was very easy for the hackers to go out there and farm it. So on top of all the data that's already out there, now we just gave them a whole bunch of additional information. So it's been kind of interesting.
I remember seeing a bunch of those things and thinking, don't fill it out, don't fill it out, especially on Facebook. People like to share that stuff, and so yeah, it really is just fodder for cyber criminals who want to use that to figure out your password and all that good stuff. So.
Exactly. And when we brought that forward to now, where the government is, trying to get the unemployment checks out to users.
Mm-hmm.
All of that data out there really allows the attackers to kind of prey on everybody. So we're certainly seeing this big explosion where the attackers go to the government and say, I am Joe Smith and I live in Washington. Send me my money in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And the government's doing that because as they send requests to the corporation to say, did you let this person go? Is this person on unemployment? Those
Mm-hmm.
letters are going to empty offices. Everybody works from home.
Right.
So all of a sudden people aren't, the government's just saying, yeah, go for it. That's must be they're laid off. So we'll send them the check. So certainly the government has a lot to do in this identity proofing and this kind of explosion here.
So have you seen like the level of the sophistication kind of grow as not only as time has passed, but just in light of the pandemic and the fact that there are so many people that have been laid off, and it just seems like it is an area that is really, really ripe for abuse. So, but when we're talking about the technology that's being used and the methods that hackers are using these days to commit this fraud, what are we seeing as far as whether their attacks are becoming more, sophisticated, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So certainly they're becoming more sophisticated, but a lot of the old school methods still work. And, you have to think of the hackers as a real company, really. They're out there to make money. And so they work together. There are people that make the attacks, people that perpetrate the attacks, people that move the money. There are all these different branches inside the attacker organization. And that really adds to the complexity of trying to catch these attacks early. Using things, there are technologies out there that can kind of catch these things early on. But the types of attacks, they're all over the place. I think the most recent ones have been kind of the traditional phishing style attacks, right? So they pretend to be from the government. They send you an email and say, you're going to lose your unemployment unless you go to this website. And the people on unemployment, it's a rush. They don't want to lose that. They go to the website, they provide the personal information, and all of a sudden their checks are being sent to somewhere else.
Yeah. I wonder, I keep hearing like almost daily on the news, these horror stories about people having to wait, on the phone for like 6 hours to talk to somebody in the unemployment benefits office, or the website is, just simply inaccessible. So I imagine that those who are kind of committing these frauds, if you will, the hackers, they're kind of preying on that too. I would imagine that just the fact that the infrastructure is not capable of handling the sheer number of requests that are coming in at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the most government infrastructure is a little dated, right? And still, in many states, it's still a paper-based environment, right? And so, really, one of the things that OneSpan saw back in March was that they had to move from paper very quickly to digital processes. So the electronic signature side of this really ballooned extremely quickly, and they, a lot of different states said that now it was okay to do digital signatures, where in the past they may have been shying away from it and maybe not adopting it. They maybe said okay, but they weren't using it. Now everybody, they have to do it that way, but they weren't prepared for it really, and so that, I think that's part of what you're seeing here, is that they have to play some catch up. They're trying to prove the identity, and they really don't have all of the pieces to prove it or the technology in place to do it. So.
Yeah. Well, that said, I imagine a lot of these state agencies have been kind of forced into, I would say, the year 2000, because they're so far behind on a lot of technology. But they are forced now to really take a hard look at their systems and figure out a way to really bring them up to speed, and make them more agile and more nimble. But just simple security tactics like two-factor authentication, things like that a lot of banks and financial institutions and other organizations are currently using, seem to be kind of a normal and necessary part of the security footprint for a lot of organizations. But do you see that kind of happening now with these, with the state and maybe even at a federal level with some of these agencies that are dealing with this level of fraud?
Yeah, it's we're still in the dark ages when it comes to federal agencies and consumer authentication protection. A lot of countries around the world have other technologies already in place that do protect that, provide tokens, provide one-time passwords. But here in the US, we're still way behind. Some of the other technologies too, when it comes to identity proofing, there are technologies out there that you can scan a government-issued ID and prove the identity of the user using that and match it with, say, a facial recognition software. And we're starting to see some movement from the federal government to allow access for third parties. So they're starting to adopt third parties and let the third parties do that. But we still have a long ways to go. So from a one-span perspective, we certainly see the digital identity proofing and the digital ID combining into that. And from our perspective, I think that's really what we need to adopt more quickly.
Well, I certainly hope that agencies get on the bandwagon here and recognize that it's no longer just a simple username and password that's going to be good enough for security moving forward, especially as the hackers are becoming so much more sophisticated in their tactics and their techniques and their level of expertise. So, I guess I can only hope, right?
I think we're all just waiting, right? We want to see something done, and even baby steps. So a lot of the times the hackers are beyond those baby steps. So if let's say the government agency says, hey, we're going to put SMS authentication in there, that's almost worse than just simply leaving static password. You really have to adopt strong authentication. I think the NIST came out and said that SMS wasn't quite there. You need to do a lot more than that. So I think there are technologies out there, and the government really needs to kind of step into that and adopt some of those.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see if the pandemic forces them to actually do that and make some changes and bolster their security to an acceptable level.
I agree.
All right. Well, Will, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me today. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure we'll have another conversation about it at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Charlene, for having me. It was a great conversation. Yeah, I think this is near and dear to my heart. Any time of security, it really hits home. And I look at this kind of, talking about the different technologies that are out there, from identity proofing to biometrics and protecting some of these mobile apps. Those are all real key components for our life in the future here, and really things that we need to start to see our governments kind of offering to us. So.
Awesome. Well, I agree 100%. So thanks again. Really do appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, guys, stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, this is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here to offer an update on some of the webinars that we have coming up this week on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. We've got some really great webinars coming up, so I hope you guys will join us for those. Our first one is happening Wednesday, June 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern. It is Securing Red Hat OpenShift Containerized Applications at Enterprise Scale. This one is sponsored by CyberArk, and it's happening on DevOps.com. And it is a must for anybody who is looking into containers in general, but specifically how they can secure their Red Hat OpenShift containerized environments more securely. This one is a demo-heavy webinar, and it's really focusing on how CyberArk secrets management and certified integrations can help organizations better secure their containerized environments without actually impacting developer velocity. So this is definitely a good one to check out if you are into, if you're using Red Hat OpenShift, or if you're just into finding out more about how your containerized applications can be better secured. Our second webinar is happening on Thursday, June 25th at 11 a.m., and it is a case study of sorts. This one is how line data streamlined CI/CD and optimized AWS cloud spend. So this one focuses on how line data is transforming its business into being more cloud native, next generation asset management, the platform, and how it's actually migrating from a traditional monolith on-premises applications to microservices and serverless architectures. Now, as part of that, it is really using the Harness technology, which Harness is actually sponsoring this particular webinar, but it really is helping, showing how Harness has helped line data in its transformational process. So really compelling information for anyone who is considering shifting gears into cloud native. As I said, this one is Thursday, June 25th at 11 a.m. Definitely worth checking out. Our third webinar this week is happening. It's another case study of sorts, and this one is also happening Thursday, June 25th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it's how Texas Instruments is using InfluxDB to uphold product standards and improve efficiencies. That title is pretty self-explanatory, but this one is actually looking at how Texas Instruments is using time series databases to gain better insights into how it runs its business and really kind of help it find where it can improve on its business, find those operational efficiencies, and basically continuously improve its productivity. So definitely another one worth checking out if you are in the market and who wasn't really in the market for continuously improving its productivity, velocity, all that good stuff that's necessary to actually run your business better. So I hope folks will join me for these 3 webinars. I believe I am the moderator for each one of these, so I hope to see you online at our webinars. If you have questions or you just want to check out the schedule for the webinars, please feel free to join us at devops.com/webinars. You can look in the upcoming section and you'll see a complete listing of all the webinars. You can also do the same on Security Boulevard, securityboulevard.com/webinars. Look in the upcoming selection and you should see everything that's coming up on that site as well. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time, and I hope to see you on the webinar.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlene. All right, it's that time of the show where we head to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley, CEO, co-founder, Accelerated Strategies Group, here with us today. Mitchell, over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining me for Analyst Corner today. One of the things that we center our work around a lot at Accelerated Strategies is this concept of software delivery management. And that's important for several reasons. While the technology and how we create software through DevOps and other approaches is super important, ultimately what matters is getting software out the door into production, in the cloud, wherever that is, on devices, mobile, etc., into consumers, customers, internal players, into the hands of people and the business processes that support those. So software delivery management is really about understanding how effective our organizations are at doing that. I mean, we spend a lot of money on software creation, IT infrastructure, all kinds of things. We want to make sure, of course, that we're getting the expected value out of it. And we have visibility into that process, which is always one of the biggest challenges with software development. Am I going to get out what I expected to, or am I getting something different? And how will I know? So we have engaged and appreciate the folks that have filled out the survey for us very much. We've engaged in a research project, done a survey, collected a lot of data. We're doing some of the analysis now that I expect to be out sometime after 4th of July. Look for that. There'll be a report on software delivery management. Don't know exactly the title yet, but we'll provide not only a report, but also some really easily consumable, digestible pieces of information. Sharing knowledge, right? Knowledge wants to be free. That's our mantra. And so we'll be doing some podcasts, some videos, some interviews, some panel conversations, presentation at DevOps World 2020 in September, virtual event. A lot of forums that we're going to be discussing this. And why? Because it's important. It's important to make sure or understand what we have to do and what the state of things are to be able to really know whether we're effective at delivering software. And while this won't be the end-all, be-all to all reports or all research into this area, I think we'll find some very compelling and interesting ideas and suggestions, some telltale signs of what are the key attributes of organizations that do this well, maybe what you can do to help improve your process, your organization around being able to deliver the right software fast, not just fast software, excuse me. So look forward to that. We'll be sharing it here on TechStrong TV, also through the DevOps Chats podcast. We'll be on some other podcasts as well. Sanjeev Sharma, principal analyst with Accelerated Strategy, is the person who's leading this work. So you'll get a chance to hear him talk about it. He's got deep levels of knowledge and expertise in the area of software creation, working with all kinds of ranges of sizes of organizations from his time at IBM to other parts of his career. So I look forward to sharing that with you. Stay tuned. We'll be announcing what some of those timing and events and output will look like. I appreciate you staying tuned and kind of following along with us. And again, if you participated in the research, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Even if it's 10 minutes to fill out a survey, it's hugely valuable to us. And I know you have to stop and take time to do that kind of thing as opposed to another task or a conversation that you need to have. And we appreciate that. Have a good day. Thanks for joining us today.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hello, welcome to tutorial 7 of the Engineering DevOps tutorial series. In this tutorial, we'll explore how do you engineer version management for DevOps. I am Mark Hornbeek, DevOps the Gray, CEO and Principal Consultant, Engineering DevOps Consulting, analyst of Accelerated Strategies Group, ambassador and author of the DevOps Institute, blogger on DevOps.com, and author of the book Engineering DevOps. My website is engineeringdevops.com. Let's get started. The agenda for this brief tutorial is why is engineering version management important to DevOps? And we'll talk about the DevOps version management blueprint and the capabilities for DevOps version management. And we'll talk about some version management engineering practices and then summarize. All of the information in this tutorial can also be found on a white paper on my website, www.engineeringdevops.com/documents, as shown on the left here. So let's get started. What is, first of all, DevOps version management? DevOps is all about version management, first of all. You have to version manage not only the software code, but also the, for the applications and the different components of the applications, but also the infrastructures upon which they are to run and the pipelines. All of this stuff these days is pretty much as code. And there are a lot of components that should be managed so that you can recover and roll forward, roll backwards when needed to a particular version and all the compatible infrastructures and pipeline components. So in order to piece together a release, you need to know what versions everything was at and be able to recover those. It's a single source of truth for the product, and it's often the source of and keeping spot for all of the intellectual property for the company's software. So it's really, really important to get version management right. And it's certainly the heart of pretty much any DevOps implementation. Without version management, you really can't have much of a DevOps implementation. So why is it important? We just talked about some of those things. I can relay some personal experience. I was in charge of a student university interaction program with several universities, and we had a case where the university decided to save some money on their backup system, and after 6 months of running, they found out that their backup system hadn't been working. They had a crash, and basically lost 6 months worth of work due to not having an adequate, source backup and capability. That was rather frustrating for a lot of people, not to mention the students who had to, graduate and show their work. That was one case, and you'd think I might have learned from that one, but after in a commercial application, I was in charge of source management system for a flagship product with 400 engineers involved. We had to halt the whole team and the product development for 9 days because we had a failed version management server. So these are just some examples of why it's kind of important to engineer things properly and make sure that you've got, something that you can rely on as your single source of truth at all points in time. And it was potentially possible we could lose all the intellectual property of our flagship product in that second case. So it's rather important that we could recover. So basically with DevOps, version management is more than just keeping source code in the source version management system. There's a lot of aspects to version management beyond just, the database of source management. It's everything around it, the practices, the way people are using it, and the infrastructure upon which it runs. All of that has to come together in a well-engineered version management solution. So what does a well-engineered DevOps version management solution look like? Here's a blueprint. You notice basically some redundancy. There's a hierarchy of systems. You have code and data and versions of those things being kept for, the infrastructure for the pipeline itself and for the code, the application code. All of that needs to be held together and made visible through APIs and through user interfaces. You want to keep track of things in easy to see backlog dashboards and status indicators. And if you have a failure, you need to be able to go to a replica and recover things quickly, and possibly even to an offline backup if there's really a serious problem where all your replicas have also failed. I personally experienced those issues. I mentioned a couple of cases in my prior slide, but these are very real issues, and it's certainly not advisable in a DevOps version management system that is so heavily dependent on keeping track of versions to only have one system that's not, redundant and backed up well. So having something that's a multi-master capability that can keep track of where where things are and be able to pull it together, because most of these repositories and version management systems are different technologies depending on what's being managed. It could be a configuration management system using a database. It could be a code management system using something like GitHub or Perforce or GitLab or some of these other systems. But pulling it all together into one multi-master to keep track of the versions of all the different things associated with any one particular release is important. So you need a multi-master that can, keep track of the overall. Having a dashboard, like I mentioned, is important to be able to quickly see the health of the overall system and to be able to support disaster recovery and prevention through backups of the replicas and procedures automated as much as possible, because you want these things to happen quickly and not interrupt, the team or the product in this fast world of DevOps. What are the capabilities? Well, there's at least 5 types of capabilities. I won't go through all the details here. You can refer to the paper, but essentially, at the administration level, there are capabilities to make sure that all the administration features are supported. So through an API or through a user interface, things like setting up user accounts and setting up, machines and setting up, let's say, streams of activities, branches and so on. The application users themselves want an easy to use user interface, and again, an API for using the different versions of the apps and branches, infrastructures, and pipelines. This might be consumed directly through an API in the databases, or it could be through some kind of third system like a service library or something of that nature. The application repos themselves need to be adequate to support not only the source code, but the build stacks, images, test code that goes with that, with those source codes, the circuit breakers code, documents, training materials, tests, certifications, metadata tags, anything to do with an application. Similarly, on the infrastructure side, similar capabilities, but in this case, you're looking at data being version managed for, things like containers registries, build artifacts, configuration management playbooks, network configuration data, storage configuration data, deployment scripts, documentation, training, tests, metadata, and tags associated with infrastructure. And the pipeline, you're talking about keeping track of versions of things like release automation scripts to integrate the pipeline with the infrastructure, build tools, plugins, orchestration interfaces between tools, and again, documentation, material, tests, and meta tags. So all of these things need to be kept track of, and a good DevOps version management solution will have all those capabilities. This is just a partial list, but it gives you the idea of the scope and depth. If you want to turn to some of the engineering practices, probably the most well-known practices that developers in a DevOps environment should be checking in their software changes to a common trunk branch of the code in a version management repository at least once per day. Obviously, in some very high, high performance environments, it can happen even more frequently, but this is a typical yardstick for DevOps. The developer should be checking in at least once a day. All the source code and the data needed to build any version should be stored in the version management repository, not just for the application, but again, the infrastructure and the pipelines that go with it. More practices. So tests and test scripts should also be included in version management to not only verify the application, but again, the infrastructure and the pipeline itself to make sure that they're working well. Don't assume that they all work well just because the application does. Executable images for any release candidate should be in a repository, and changes to the code and the data should be tagged with metadata so you can support queries and searches across this fairly large amount of data for applications, pipelines, and infrastructure. And more engineering practices. So the idea of a multi-master version management repository with the capability to keep track of versions of repos, right, for the different components that have different repos is very important, and the ability to control those and do auto reverse when necessary if you need to roll back. Having a dashboard and alert capability to keep track of the health of the repos, as I mentioned before. Having capabilities for disaster detection and recovery when necessary. if there are serious failures, to invoke recovery procedures, hopefully automatically. Have at least one offline backup for all repositories, and be available to restore those repositories on demand. Make sure you test those once in a while. Had cases like I mentioned where we thought it was working and it wasn't, so make sure you're testing those. Additional practices: the schedule and frequency of saved versions should be deterministic and automated. Don't just save every possible version all the time. You're going to have a big database there, but you should at least have a schedule to say things like, well, we're going to back up everything once a week for any release, and we're going to back up all the major versions, and of course each release that was issued. Replication and backup process should be verified at least once per deployed release, hopefully more frequently, and have access to repositories controlled with role-based access management systems. We don't have a lot of time to go into the security aspects of version management in this tutorial, but I will be covering that in a subsequent tutorial on continuous security. So that's basically the tutorial today on how do you engineer version management for DevOps? And the answer is basically, as shown here, a master system of record that keeps track of relevant combinations of versions of code and data for applications, pipelines, and environments across multiple repositories as necessary. This multi-master repository can then be called upon by automated scripts to roll forward or roll back releases when needed, such as in the case of problems or even disaster recovery scenarios. That's it for this tutorial. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to look up the white paper on engineeringdevops.com documents, or get a copy of my book at mybook.to, Engineering DevOps, or email me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com. Again, thanks for listening. Look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial in this series. Thank you.
Elsa, you're all over the place.
How am I supposed to do anything when she's over here just doing her own thing?
Okay, well, maybe if Dan played more than just one string, we'd all be more on the same page.
Are you out of your mind? Okay, I do the E string. That's my job.
Isn't there an easier way to do this?
I
there
wish.
has to be.
I literally just suggested
Right?
something. Nobody ever listens to me, though, so...
ridiculous every time.
When your team's not on the same page, things can get weird, fast. Don't make your DevOps team live like this.
Il tutto tu tempo es finito, Dan!
See? It's like we're not speaking the same language. I'm out.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, making sure your teams are all on the same page.
Do you know how to play the E string?
I can learn.
Thanks very much, Mitch, and thanks much to Mark Hornbeek as he continues his series on engineering DevOps. I hope that's going to wrap up today's show for Tuesday, the 23rd, June 23rd. Hope you enjoyed it. We are back with a fresh new show on Thursday, the 25th. Tomorrow will be a replay of one of our earlier episodes, but episode 57 is on Thursday. Our production schedule is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Until then, stay well, stay safe, stay strong, TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.